The session will now begin. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much. I'm Ella. You probably know that because everybody knows that if I'm Ella, this is Simone, and everybody knows Simone. So we apologize for the delay. Little short staffed, but at least the lighting is flattering, and we will have a lovely program. This is the ninth year in a row, except for 2020 COVID, that we have held Meet the Authors. And it's a testimony to the marvelous people that write about France. And I'm so happy to be a part of it, to have founded this in 2014. So thank you all again for joining us. Um, Again, this is just welcome. There's something that all of these authors have in common, and who could guess what that is? That
France.
Very good. Very good. Now we all write something different. I've written something very different. But the reason that we all are here is because we love our adopted country. And I will quote an ancient American president that was known to have said, everybody has two countries, the country of their birth and France. So with that, we will turn it over to our MC, Miss Adrian Leeds.
Thank you. God, it feels so weird to be way up here, Thank you everyone for your patience with, getting your drinks and coming in. We really appreciate that. And so we're gonna have a little bit less time with the authors, but I don't think we're gonna miss too much. Um, I have been the MC of this event since 2017. And I am just the MC. This is Ella Dyer's event. In fact, Ella started this in
2014.
Right, 9 years ago. Amazing. So every single year, and we've always had a really good turnout. So I really appreciate everybody being here. Um, I just want to say a little bit about what I do before we talk to the authors, because I'm not a published author, but I publish 3 times a week. You probably get the newsletters, right? So I'm not exactly in print, except that I'm in print. And I seriously appreciate the role of the author and the life of the author and what they have to go through to get their books published. So for me, it's very important to actually support their writing efforts, and this is a way that we can do that. So I urge you all, okay, to buy their books whenever possible and support the authors whenever you can. And I believe some of the authors here have their books with them, and this is your opportunity to get signed copies. If you're not a subscriber to our Nouvelle Lettre, which is a French word I created to call instead of newsletter, you can subscribe just by going to our website at adrianleeds.com, and they're filled with lots of information. We also do a monthly coffee gathering called Après-Midi. We do it every month in Paris and have been doing that since 2003. And we just recently started it here. So it's every other month starting in January. And I see a whole lot of faces who have already been there a couple of times. It's at Le Félix 4. And our next event is, Patty, you have the date? In July. It's the 4th Thursday of the month. Thank you. And Craig Carlson, author of 2 books, is going to be speaking then. So I urge you all to come as well. Now we have 5 authors with us today, and they are going to each speak for about 15 minutes and talk about. Yes, ma'am. You have a. No. We have 5.
We have a surprise guest.
One of our. I was getting there. One of our authors, Lisa Pepin, which I'm really sorry to hear, is not going to be with us today because she's sick at home. But we have a surprise guest at the end, and I'm going to just leave it at that. That's why we have 5 authors. So they're going to speak about 15 minutes, and then at the end, we'll have a Q&A, so you can ask whatever you want to ask. And Lynn, have you had your
I think I'm mic'd. Is this on?
Let me
Yes.
also make note that we are recording this, so you will be able to watch it again later or share it with your friends, and I'll post it on my website and in our
Ce n'est pas
newsletters.
facile.
And I'd like to introduce Miss Lynn Heyman.
Hi.
Okay, did you get something to drink, Lynn?
Oui, and can I have a little stool or something?
Come on up. No, you're going to come
Okay.
up. You ready?
Am I? Yeah.
Are you okay?
Oh là là.
Here, you want to
J'ai
sit?
le décalage horaire.
Stand to
Alors,
my left.
je suis
Stand to my left.
fatiguée.
Okay. Lynn is jet lagged. I warn you. We're
Just warn them anyhow.
I'm warning you. Lynn is from a New York native, but she's been teaching French language and literature for. Phones off, please. I bet your mind's going to ring. You watch. That's what's going to happen. She spent many years in Paris and throughout France, but she is now living in San Diego, lovely Southern California. She attended the University of Massachusetts and the Sorbonne in Paris. She studied at the Université de Strasbourg, right? Where you learned business French. And she has been awarded on numerous occasions by the American Association of Teachers, the French government, the Quebec government, and the Université de Pau. So after teaching for 38 years, high school and university, one of the many feathers in her cap was being hosted by King Mohammed VI in Morocco. You may have to tell us about that.
That's a whole other story. That'll be another
no,
book.
Okay, the best story Lynn has is that she died on the operating table. And on that note, and she's here to tell the tale. I give you Lynn Heyman.
I obviously came back. Thank you. Thank you. It's great to see everyone. It's thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Ella, for having me, inviting me. I love being back in my home, France, because I feel so at home here. I've spent a lot of time here. So one of my favorite students, Chris, who's running back there, is, was in my class for 4 years and lives in London now. But he went to Sciences Po. I'm very proud of him. And he flew in from London to listen to me. So he actually flew in to see Adrian. So truth be told, right? Right, Chris?
No,
and my cousin Helen is here. We grew up together in New York. She's a Texan now.
Toute la famille est là.
Toute la famille, exactement. Je ne voyage jamais sans famille. This is my book, Paris Moments, and this is my most recent endeavor. And I started writing it during the pandemic, and it was an odd thing because people ask me all the time, what was your writing process? And I'm just going to briefly tell you that every night I'd wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning with a scene in my head for the next chapter. And if I didn't make notes and write it down, I could not get back to sleep. So something magical happened. I had to write this book along with my Maltipoo Lola, who was by my side during the whole pandemic. And to be locked away is a perfect storm for a writer, because you get to really work and concentrate. And so this is the book that was born. And it's available on Amazon. And I have bookmarks for people who would be interested later on. So let's see. My book is a love letter to France. And it's a sensual love letter because I love the poet Baudelaire, and I love all his use in his poetry of all the senses. And that was one of my motivations for this book. In addition, I did my agrégation at the Sorbonne on Camus, and I love Camus and his whole humanistic approach to live in today and not worry about past, not worry about future, but be in the moment is something that drives the lead character here, whose name is Brie. And I don't know. I love Brie, so I had to name her Brie. It's my favorite. I even had brie for breakfast this morning. So the setting is also an important character, and the book takes place in Paris as well as in the south of France, because I've spent a lot of time in this area in Nice, in Antibes. I've been to Bandol, Juan-les-Pins, Saint-Jean. Well, I'm not going to name every town, but there's a lot of towns in this area. But I just find setting to be a very important character in the things that I write. And there's a dog in here. And I think dogs are very important to me. I'm happy we have a dog here in attendance. And I find that dogs are the most important thing in France, more important than the people. And in cafes, they're served first. People interact based on dogs. So it's modeled after my dog Lola, but this is Lulu in the book, and she's very important. And so dogs and food are key things about France, and dogs and food are important in this book. So Bree is a middle-aged woman, and she's faced with a near-death experience. And if you think this is autobiographical, I will deny it. But I had emergency open heart surgery for a congenital issue. They didn't think I was going to make it. I died on the table. They brought me back. And that was a turning point in my life. It sort of changed my complete outlook on life, as I think things would. So she suddenly leaves New York. She has no luggage. She suddenly leaves New York. She's could be in grave danger. There's a mystery element to this book. And she's on a quest to heal her heart in Paris and in the south of France and regain her power after she lost it in a toxic marriage. So Brie has a French soul. Can I have some of my drink there?
Sure.
I am so
Which one is
thirsty.
hers?
I am just. Voila. Thank you. Merci.
I'll be your table.
Okay. I've been up since 3 o'clock in the morning. Anyway.
We warned them that you were jet lagged.
Oh. Anyway, am I making sense so far?
Yes.
I hope so. Okay.
Yes.
So the bad villain is Jack Taylor in this book. And how did I get the name Jack Taylor? I wanted to be careful that I wasn't naming anybody who might think they were Jack Taylor. Jack Taylor is a real composite character, but he's a real bad guy. So one of my former students, because my students influenced me a lot, who's a big surfer, had a friend who also had an art gallery in Beverly Hills, the nicest, sweetest guy ever, and the most endearing person. But I loved the name and I thought it sounded nasty. So I said, Jack, can I use your name for a character in my book? And he's like, yeah, sure. Oh, that sounds great. I said, he's the villain. He's a really bad guy. He said, oh, really make me horribly nasty. Just, I love it. The more horrible this guy is, the better I will like it. So, Jack Taylor. There are flashbacks. Have you seen the film Memento? Do you remember that film? Has anybody read Robe Grillée? Or the Nouveau Roman, the new novel? And the novel has a beginning, a middle, and an end, but not necessarily in that order. Or sort of a Godard film where things come in out of nowhere. I've tried to make the plot line fairly linear, but so it's Nouveau Roman light. You won't be thinking, where's all this coming from in different directions, but sometimes all of a sudden you have a flashback and you have to sort of realize that this is flashing back to Brie's marriage with the evil Jack Taylor. Doesn't that, the name to me sounds nasty. I don't know. So one of the themes, as I said before, is living in today, not knowing how much time we have so on this planet, and so we can't be sure of anything. So it makes no sense to wallow in things that happened in the past or what might occur, and to be open to what might occur, and to be fearless. And this is what happens with Bree. She has an arc as a character of somebody who's sort of beaten down and just barely able to function, and she brings herself back up. But it's a slow process. And she does that with the help of her French friends. Now, I was lucky when I was at the Sorbonne, I was embraced by a lot of French locals who were my classmates. I was the only American in the class, and I had to really prove myself. Like, what is she doing here? You can imagine. So, these two women befriended me and their whole family. And so they are the friends that help Bree, or it's based on that particular family. And it was a lot of years ago that I met these two women, and we're still friends today. We just saw each other a couple of months ago, and it's like, the friendship goes on and on. So the friends are based on that character, and the name of the sisters there are Annick and Chantal. They're not their real names, anyway. I want to start by reading a section um, about Bree's neighbor, because her friends have a house in Cannes that they've redesigned, and Madame Fifi is their neighbor, and Madame Fifi is this wacky artist type character. So I thought, since I'm in the South, I want to read a section that takes place in the South. So Chantal's neighbor, Madame Fifi, came to visit and handed her an invitation for all of them to come to an art opening at her gallery in Saint-Paul-de-Vence. It was a big event she held every year in late July, highlighting the top artists of the area. Her paintings were often amongst those featured. Fifi was known for her expressionist style and bold use of color. A Parisian, she had relocated to Provence in her later years. She followed the tradition of other French artists who moved south as they got up in years and craved more favorable weather. Picasso had been one of the artists who came to the south coast of France. He had abandoned his native Spain and then his adopted city, Paris. He moved to Antibes, and the Musée Picasso, which many of you probably know, then opened, containing only his work, including many ceramics. Picasso himself spent much time at this location. Brie recalled a chance meeting she had with Picasso at this museum in Antibes when she was 19 and he was in his 70s. Pretty usual for Picasso, right? She had noticed him on the back veranda with the backdrop of the blue Mediterranean. He was hard to miss, wearing all black, his bald head gleaming in the sun. Her Aunt Francoise encouraged her to go up and greet the artist. Picasso offered to give Brie and Francoise a tour of the museum, and they were thrilled. Personal tour. After 2 hours with the artist, he invited Brie to come to his home on her own to have dinner with him. Her aunt whispered to her niece of Picasso's infamous reputation with women. He had offered to gift Brie with a piece of art if she accepted. Brie reflected on the lurid depiction of women in his art, and she was quick to decline his invitation. So I have a short story about this. It may or may not have happened to me. And then there's another section, and this is the love interest, because this is a romance novel. And let's see.
But Lynn, she gave up getting a Picasso.
But she wasn't beaten up and left for dead in the street. Yeah. She kept her soul.
True that. Okay.
Yeah. I did meet, by the way, Françoise Gillot, who lives in San Diego, and we had some coffee together a few times and talked about Picasso. She mostly talked about Picasso. Yeah. So the love interest is named Laurent de Laval, and he is a French diplomat. And part of the themes of the romance novel is that Brie decides to be vulnerable to love again after being deeply hurt and on the verge of death. That the philosophy of Michel Houellebecq, who many of you might know, taking risks in love, because you can't really be in love without taking a risk, but it's scary. So this is a little description about Laurent de Laval. I need more water. Adrian, thank you. Excuse me? I don't trust myself right now. I've had like 3.5 hours of sleep in the past 2 days. Brie and Annick, and remember Annick is Brie's friend who's French, entered the convention ballroom filled with about 300 people, the place abuzz with literary talk. They seated themselves near the front of an enormous room, crystal chandeliers gleaming above their heads. The speaker approached the podium. The room fell silent. A distinguished man in a well-tailored blue suit was introduced as Monsieur Laurent de Laval from the Ambassade de France. He began to speak about French literature and its impact internationally. The printed program stated that he had a doctorate in comparative literature from Oxford University. He had authored 3 books of fiction and 5 nonfiction works. Brie thought it was unusual that he had studied in England. Monsieur de Laval began with references to Marguerite Duras and her novel Moderato Cantabile. The Italian words dropped off his tongue like marbles coated in honey. It occurred to Brie that this man looked somewhat familiar. She whispered to Annick, "That was one of our favorite books at the Sorbonne. Do you remember, my friend?" "Of course, ma chère," replied Annick. The man in the blue suit continued, "The scent of magnolia is so strong in that work, it grabs you by the throat and leaves you breathless." He brushed his light brown hair back with his hand, gathering his composure. Brie realized where she had seen him before. She looked into her purse and found the card he had given her at the Louvre several days before. Laurent de Laval, Ambassade de France, Quai d'Orsay, Paris. She showed the card to Annick, who looked back at her with mild shock. Perhaps it was the description of the magnolia that had deeply affected her. Brie looked up at the stage. Monsieur de Laval's blue-green eyes were focused on her like a panther on his prey. Annick whispered, "So you are acquainted with him?" Brie nodded in an affirmation. Her heart fluttered as she fingered her gold necklace. So how much time do I have?
A few more minutes.
Okay, I have one more passage, if you guys are interested. And this is the Bal Masqué. And this is a big scene that kind of goes on and on. But Madame Fifi, who, has all these parties, has a Bal Masqué. But it's sort of a risque event and très sexy. So this is just a section of it. But my cousin Helen's daughter, Emily, told me, "Read that, Lynn. That might get their attention." But I'm not going to read the real risque parts. I'm going to read
Why not?
Yeah, because, I'm running out of time and Ella has to present. Okay, so if you want to know, you have to read the book. Okay. So The guests continued to view the artwork. Laurent's favorite of the photographs was the color image of Brigitte Bardot in Saint-Tropez eating strawberries fed to her by an unknown admirer. Beyond the photographs were a series of Matisse's odalisques from the artist's Moroccan period, part of another private collection. Brie and Laurent, both admirers of Moroccan culture and decor, spent additional time admiring the works. Brie preferred the illustrated version of the French poet Baudelaire's Invitation au Voyage, written for his exotic Haitian mistress, Jean Duval. And Jean Duval really was sort of the counterpart to Jack Taylor. She was the female version of Jack Taylor. Do you guys know Jean Duval and any of that poetry or the history of it? Just Baudelaire is incredible. Every time I read him, I feel like I've read the same poem 100 times, and yet it's all fresh and new. Um, so let's see, where am I? Brie had analyzed Baudelaire's poetry in depth and recited her favorite quote to Laurent, who recited it back to her. Là, tu n'es qu'ordre et beauté, luxe calme et volupté. This juxtaposition of images enthralled them both, and they embraced in front of the illustration. Then the lights dimmed, and the focus became a spotlight on the runway stage in front of the gallery. King Louis XIV, the Sun King, appeared in his elaborate purple and golden robes, gold tights, and high heels. He posed with his mistress, the Marquise de Montespan. She wore lavender French lace lingerie and was coiled around the king like a seductive snake. Brie felt her skin tingle. And I bring in the Marquis de Sade and all of these characters from French history, and they're all on the runway, and they're all, in various stages of costuming. And the guests are also in costumes. So, I don't know where this came from, some weird part of my subconscious, but I really like this because um, I had actually been to an art gallery in New York where they staged something like that with historical figures from American history. So Ben Franklin and all these people who we thought were great statesmen, but they were really nasty and doing bad things in France. So I thought I should put this in the book, but make it characters from French history. So um, I hope I'm going to stop here because I know my time is up. But thank you so much, and I appreciate all this great audience. Thanks.
Thank you, Lynn, and for coming all this way and for staying awake.
I tried.
Lisa Pepin, who is not going to be here today, she wrote The Dark Side of Black Truffles. And Lisa once gave a group of us a tour through her own truffle farm in Provence. So I was really looking forward to her being here, but instead she'll be here next year. So mark it on your calendar for next year. Okay, so you can meet with Lisa Pepin. But at the moment, instead, I'm going to introduce Miss Ella Dyer. Miss Ella.
Jackie.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about Ella. You're going to be on my right side?
Yes.
Okay. Simone, you behave. That's what that is, that signal. I love it. Over the past 40 years, Ella's varied career path has taken her from working at the Playboy Mansion to earning an MBA from the International University of Monaco and working with the Adrian Leeds Group as one of our top property consultants. So
thank you.
She's going to tell you a lot more about her career path, I am certain. But she is the author of Nice in Nice, and she is fond of saying a lifetime in Nice is never enough. Well, and you see she's made her life here in Because when I met Ella, you know, she stalked me for a while. This is how we met. And then she came to Paris for one lunch with me. And then she said, but I'm only living in Nice part time. I'm going back and forth to Atlanta. And I said, no, we need you here. We need you here all the time. And eventually she said to her husband, Jody, guess what, darling? I love you, but I'm not leaving.
Mm-hmm.
And so here she is. Um, she is the founder of this event, and she is the author of the book, and she's going to talk about her book, Nice and Nice.
Very good.
Thank
Thank you.
Sit down.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, everybody. I was able to meet some of you all while we were waiting to start the program. So once again, you know, the 9th year, with the exception of 2020, it's really amazing that my little vapid beach read, Nice and Nice, has drawn such a crowd. So I'm gonna start with that. Um, it's been 10 years since I wrote this book. And I cannot believe that that has gone by so quickly. Um, I want to tell you how I wrote it. I'm going to tell you a little bit about when I wrote it. But more importantly, I'm going to tell you why I wrote it. And from that, I'm going to have each of you think of something at the end of my little section here. So I wrote Nice and Nice as a result of a blog that I wrote daily. My good friend Mary, sitting up front here, she remembers the days where I wasn't working and we'd be out late at night, often dancing and drinking, sometimes here. And but I always wanted our families, because Jody would be here with me as well, also out late at night, but not drinking. And I wanted our families to know what we were doing. So every day, dutifully, I would write a blog and I would say, and we did this, and then we did that. And I was surprised that people from around the world were reading this. But as Adrian said, I eventually, after about 5 years of writing that, that blog went dormant because I was going to business school. Anything to stay a little bit longer in Nice. I had visions of just sipping rosé on the Riviera and maybe learning a little bit of French at business school. Little did I know that I would be locked in a windowless basement room 6 days a week at nearly 50 years old with multiple students who already spoke many languages, and some already had master's degrees, and there I was with no rosé. After 3 weeks, I called my husband. I was sobbing. He goes, well, you know, you don't have to do this. You don't even have to work. Why, you know, you don't have to. You can quit. And I said, no, I'm not quitting. I'm not, I'm not going to do that. And I finished with the help of all those intelligent students that now call me mom, and their kids call me grandma. So I stopped writing the blog. The blog just basically went dormant. Graduated from International University of Monaco, went into a technology company because I wasn't living here full time. And you know, after about 4 years, we didn't get the institutional funding that we wanted to take the application nationwide and internationally. So I licensed the technology to another startup. I said, now what? What do you do? Are you going to go back and blog again? You have nothing to write about. How about taking that blog, that's your content, and repurpose it into a book? Which is exactly what I did. So about January 2013, I'm thinking, gee, what do I do? I'm going to be 55 in May. I know, I'm going to have a party for myself. And I'm going to release my book signing. is going to be my birthday party. How do I publish a book? Fortunately, I had a dear friend that had published a book. And so I engaged her services and I took my blog content and I created Nice and Niece. This is not a book. This is a calling card. And that's something I want you all to think about. So let me read the first page of this engrossing tome that I wrote. Because the second page is me and Mary and I are going to some bar. But the first page, and I'm from California. You hear a little bit of a Southern twang because mother was from Memphis. Mother, who was part French, was from Memphis. So even though I was born and raised in Los Angeles, I do have this little bit of a Southern twang. I was joking with someone earlier. At least I no longer say bonjour, y'all. But I moved to Atlanta, where I had the good fortune to meet my superstar spouse, Jody, who is jet lagged. Unlike you, Lynn, he could not make it. He's sleeping like a baby on Jean Medecin in our apartment, of course.
Not on Jean Medecin.
Our apartment's on, I said, in our apartment on Jean Medecin. Living down the street from the lofty setting of the Margaret Mitchell House, where my 55th birthday party and book release will be held, inspired me to not only publish my blog, but begin it backwards, as she did with the amazing Gone with the Wind, at least in the movie. Of course, my musings, mostly those in the south of France, are not being compared with her classic work. Rather, her classic work continues to inspire all, especially those of us who have been fans for decades. My opening page is my letter of acceptance for the reservation at the Margaret Mitchell House, where I decided in January that I was going to celebrate my birthday in May with my book release. That's what I needed, was I won't use the word target date because I don't like the vernacular target, bullet points, and those kinds of things. But it was a goal. And it wasn't the finish line that I was crossing when I turned 55. I didn't realize that it was just the beginning. So the next year, 2014, I'm like, well, I need to sell this. It's not going to sell itself. All my family had bought it. All my friends had bought it. People that were featured in my blog bought it because they were like, oh, gosh, she didn't publish that photo, did she? I better look and see. That's the book that they're paying me not to write. I thought, well, I need to start promoting this. I have a degree in marketing. I know how to do that. I know, let's have a party. That's a recurring theme. And so we did. And 2014, a small group of us gathered in the hall adjacent to the little church that I attend. And there we were selling our books, and it was wonderful. And the next year we did the same thing. And the next year. A few years later, I'm like, okay, well, I'm enjoying postgraduate school, not really doing a whole, postgraduate. I'm enjoying life from after postgraduate school. My book is published. Once again, now what? And the now what came with sending an email to Adrian. I'm going to be in Paris on this date. Can I take you to lunch? And she's like, well, okay. And I said just that. And I flew to Paris, took her to lunch, and I said, I want to work with you. I love what you do. I've done it myself for my family. I'm not here full time, just as she said. And she's like, well, you kind of need to be here full time. So I went home, back to the south of France, you know how awful that was, but a little dejected. And then I received an email that Adrian was going to be writing in her nouvelette, mentioning Nice and Niece. And I was like, wow, this really is a calling card. This is great. And eventually, as she says, I stalked her till she recruited me. But that's really the point. I told you how I wrote the book. It was my blog. When I wrote it, it was about a 5 year period, and we were just having fun, and I wanted to inform our family what we were doing. But the real why is that this became a calling card. I literally can go into any social setting, business setting, because I've opened our conferences and tours for 2 years now with the Adrian Leeds group. I wrote the book on Nice. And I would say to everybody, you have a book somewhere, you have a story that only you can tell. And I encourage you to do that, because Nice and Niece is not only my calling card, but it's really a letter of thanks to the generations before. I was so close to Jodi's parents. They were like my parents, and they are featured throughout this book. It is a thank you letter to them. It was really them that made me write the blog so that they knew that we were having fun and being safe and so forth. It's a recognition of the current generation. Two of my three grandchildren are mentioned in my book. And it's also a little bit of a history for future generations. I can see my oldest granddaughter is named Ella. I can see her reading this with her friends or to her grandchildren going, yeah, that's your great great grandma on top of that bar dancing right there with her friend Mary, who still lives in Nice. So, once again, I encourage you, you have a story, write it. Use a human for help or use Chat GPT.
No, God, no.
Set your goal date. Remember, it's not the finish line, it's your goal date, because it really can be the start of something new. And one never knows what doors will open as a result. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Ella. We all know she's the queen of Nice, right? And she has a princess with her.
Yes.
Very well dressed. I would like to introduce Caroline Ohanian. Caroline, you want to come on up? Caroline is the author of La Biche Azulée, which means the lone deer, which is in both French and in English. So you have your choice. Caroline was born in Monaco. I didn't know people were born in Monaco.
Well,
Is
I
that
was.
even possible? Yes. Graduate of a top business school, a business manager, divorcee, and a mother. A lot of us are, though. Divorcees and mothers, yes. She is an idealist and an artist at heart who lives surrounded by nature and animals on the heights of her native French Riviera in the southeast of France. And I love this paragraph. I'm sure you wrote this paragraph, but I'm going to read it because it's beautiful. Following a series of family tragedies, it was an absolute calmness after months of introspection that she felt the irrepressible and liberating need to write, as if to breathe, at her humble level, a breeze of wisdom and peace to all those who will honor and delight in reading her work. The Lone Deer. Here you go. Caroline.
Actually, I think I'm gonna need some support. Can I bring
Of
this?
course.
Okay. Okay, that's better. Hello, everyone. So I'm Caroline. Sorry, I feel more comfortable like this because I have the books. So, as Adrian told you, yes, I was born and raised on the Riviera in France, and I wrote this book because it's a novel. It's based on a true story. I'm not gonna lie to you. It's my story. It's fictionalized on form, not on substance. So it's a very personal book for me. And I'm gonna start by reading you maybe the summary, and then I'll explain it a bit further. So I just translated to English. I'm French, so it was written in French because it was more natural for me. And yeah, this is the translation for it so far. So not so long ago, Clémence, 34 years old, seemed to have it all. The perfect marriage, model children, a castle-like life on the French Riviera, her dream job, a loving family and friends. Yet, on that August night in 2020, she found herself desperately alone and literally paralyzed in the ambulance that was taking her to the emergency room, caught by the harsh reality of her toxic divorce, burnout, and this new love that was leaving her. Told you this is very personal. I wanted to read a little bit of the first chapter because it's actually the starting point of the novel, and then it's all about flashbacks. So here is a small part of it. I still struggle. So Clémence is in the ambulance that's taking her to the hospital, and she's taken away by some firemen. I still struggle to determine with certainty whether he's flirting with me or not. That's the fireman. But I know he's right, and I'm aware of how ridiculous my situation is. This brutal separation, without any consideration, as if I was being ripped away from myself, is the final straw. When I think back to the ease and coldness with which Achille ended our relationship, and you gotta find out who he is, I am stunned. Me, who cannot stand failure, my heart is now torn between this abyssal pain of losing Achille and the black anger of seeing Max win. And you'll have to see who Max is as well. And it is my body, overwhelmed from all sides, that is giving up. A sudden wave of coldness invades me, despite the stifling and humid heat on this summer night of the legendary French Riviera. Muscle contractions intensify, my legs and feet tense up again, and my arms are still frozen. Donna, my dog, she's very important as well, nestles a little closer to my chest as if to warm me up. The crisis started more than 2 hours ago, 2 long hours of unbearable muscle tension, worthy of my worst pregnancy contractions, uninterrupted and without any epidural. By this time, there will be no cute cherub as a reward, instantly making me forget all the pain endured. No, this time, the reality is much darker, and the torture will give birth to a premature separation and a stillborn love story, of which I will have to mourn alone as a single mother with no maternity leave. Perhaps I should have aborted this love affair 9 months ago when it was still possible. Tears stream down my cheeks, and Paul gently caresses my hair as if to extract me from my sad thoughts. So Paul is the fireman. Calm down, Clémence. We're halfway there. You need to relax. I can massage your feet if you want. Yeah, that's what French firefighters do to you in an ambulance. He suggests with a wink, no thanks, I'll be okay. His proposition surprises me. Watch out, Paul. You are dangerously close to becoming a stereotypical firefighter who jumps on anything that moves. And I'm still literally paralyzed by the last one. Okay, then think of positive things. Talk to me about your children. Yes, good idea. I have 2 little girls, Camille, who is almost 7, and Charlotte, who will be 4 next month. They were on vacation with my parents this week, and I was supposed to pick them up tomorrow. He understands my concern. Okay, I'm sure they can spend a few more days on vacation with your parents so you can rest. I nod in response. The ambulance continues its windmill's descent from the hills of Cannes and approaches the city. Just as I was starting to relax, I now feel nauseous. But it's a good thing that I'm already breathing into a plastic bag, so I can vomit directly into it. Paul helps me hold the bag close to my lips, but I haven't eaten anything in the past 24 hours, so there's not much to regurgitate except a bit of bile. Yuck. Just what I needed. I swallowed with disgust. Paul lightly wipes my mouth with a tissue. It's not like me to ask for help, and now it's becoming really embarrassing. I'm completely dependent and uncomfortable. I'm mortified with shame. If only I could move my hands and snap my fingers to erase this nightmare of a night. Now, at least I doubt that Paul will still be flirting with me after this incident. However, he reassures me it'll be all right, asks the pilot to slow down a bit. I'll put on some meditation music that should help you relax until we get to the hospital. Thanks, Paul. That's sweet of you. How chivalrous and attentive Paul is. He reminds me of the one who put me in that state. There's the last paragraph that if you want, I can read in French so you can feel the sense of the difference, and then we can talk further. Sorry.
I know we don't have
Maybe my hair is not helping. Okay. So this, we're switching languages. Je ferme les yeux et me laisse tendrement bercer par la douce musique que Paul joue sur son téléphone portable, au creux de mon oreille. Peu à peu, la pression retombe et la souffrance se lasse. Je quitte les tourments de mon corps et laisse mon esprit divaguer. Je me retrouve transportée dans un tourbillon de souvenirs, comme si l'univers voulait me transmettre un message du fin fond de mon âme. Je regarde défiler les images de chaque étape importante de ma vie de femme, tel un réalisateur en pleine post-production, le rythme de mes mélodies préférées en guise de bande originale. Je plonge dans cette rétrospective entêtante dont je suis l'héroïne, comme pour me rappeler à qui je suis vraiment. J'ignore où me mènera ce voyage chimérique et quel type de long métrage vais-je visionner, mais je sens que la prochaine séance chez ma psy ne sera pas vaine. So yeah, this is the first volume. There's a second one that is in preparation, and it's a journey. This first volume is a journey into her past, laying the foundations of what will lead her to this spiritual epiphany that will shake up her life, change her perception, her dimension, and call everything into question. What if chance did not exist? What if everything was written? Those are the first steps of a lone doe on her spiritual awakening journey towards soul wholeness and unconditional love. So this is the first part of it, and it starts way back in the past, and it will help you understand what happened, what led to that moment where everything falls apart, and you still find the strength to carry on. So this is a very I have written that book because I thought that I first wrote it for my daughters, and then I also wrote it because I felt that if I could help even one person understanding what I've been through and making her life better, then I would have won. And I wanted to read you the review I got from a French literary blogger that summarized very well the spirit of this book, and I was quite proud of it because it's a reader that I've never met, and I was glad that she understood what it meant for me. So here is what she said. Reading finished, I have never read a novel with such a heavy heart. From the beginning, we're warned, based on a true story, not recommended for children under 12. And then we meet Clémence, who is in the midst of a panic attack, at the end of her rope, evacuated in an ambulance, and who will tell us her story. Clémence, a vibrant, brilliant young woman who meets Max during her year in exchange in the United States. It's love at first sight before the descent into hell. I started this book with a bad feeling, and I continued it with a tight throat, holding my breath. I regained hope along with Clémence before finishing it, saying, this can't be it, because it's just the first volume. I'll have to wait for the sequel. From the first chapter, where I emerged into this story that made me feel like I was being drawn into a windmill. The writing style is full of emotion, and we immediately identify with the heroine. By the third chapter, I already knew I would have a hard time putting it down, because this novel primarily deals with domestic violence.
Take your time.
I'm gonna do it. And I couldn't help but ask myself, if I were in Clement's shoes, what would I have done? From the fourth chapter on, I took the time to listen to each chapter, to the song that starts each chapter, because that's the summary of each chapter. And it added a new dimension to my reading. A huge favorite that I haven't had in a long time. A novel to be discovered urgently. I'm very touched because this woman who wrote this review also told me that it made her reflect her entire relationship and made her realize a lot of things. So it kind of really touched me. So as you can all understand, it's a very emotional book for me, which is why it's also very interesting, because it's when your shrink tells you that no one could have imagined all of the things that are happening, it's a good sign. When they tell you that your life starts to look like a movie, I think it's a good sign. So it needs to be written, and yeah, so I suggest you can read it in both French and English, and I have some hard copies here and also some bookmarks if you want. And I don't know if you wanna.
Carolyn, you're going to have us all crying.
I'm so sorry.
No, but we have to read the book now.
Well, yeah, you gotta know.
We have to read it now, exactly, to see what brought up so much emotion. Well, we have a lot of memoirs happening here, really, because I'd like to introduce Janet Holstrand. You got your mic, dear. Janet Holstrand came from Paris for this event, and she's the author of 3 books. You want me to do it for you?
Yes.
We'll get you mic'd up, girl. Yeah. Don't worry. It has to be on this phone. Okay. Okay, now you can. Yeah, that's good. That's good. That'll work.
Oh, big step, like you said.
Okay. I've known Janet for, do we know how many years?
I think about
15,
15.
20? 15 or 20? Yeah. I helped Janet and her husband buy a house in Champagne, where she lives now. It took her some time to move over full time. She is an author, a writer, an editor, a writing coach, a teacher of literature. She is surrounded by words.
Yes, that's right.
And she's the author of 3 books, including her latest, which is A Long Way from Iowa, From the Heartland to the Heart of France. But she's also author of Demystifying the French, How to Love Them and Make Them Love You, which everyone needs to read so you can understand the cultural differences. And she also wrote a book called Moving On, which is a practical guide to downsizing. Although I'm not sure she's been downsized.
The family home. It's a really big job.
And we
probably
all know
some
it.
of you know.
We all know it. Janet writes frequently for Bonjour Paris, so maybe you've seen her articles in that. And she has her own blog called Writing from the Heart, Reading from the Road. And you've also done France Today, France Revisited, right? She's grew up in Minnesota, spent many years in New York and DC, and now she is in Essois, where Renoir lived.
Yes, you did.
Janet Holstrand.
Thank you. And thank you, Ella, for inviting me to do this. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about this book, which you might think from the title that I'm from Iowa, but as Adrian just said, I'm not.
I'm from Minnesota. So why is the book called A Long Way from Iowa?
That's a good question.
Yes. And when I go to promote it in Iowa, I imagine I will be asked that question. Anyway, so I started this book, actually, I wrote the first words of it and had the idea for it 30 years ago. So sometimes a book takes a couple of years and sometimes it needs longer. In my case, it needed a long time. And the reason I wrote this book is I wrote this book really for my mother and my grandmother, both of whom had a real passion for reading and writing and travel. And neither one of them got to do very much in their lives about that, especially my grandmother, and especially about writing and publish. They didn't get to publish either one of them. But I think that they would have both loved to. And so I was not exactly a perfect daughter. I was a very rebellious daughter. I didn't want to be like, my mom ended up being a nurse. And I absolutely didn't want to be a nurse. And I didn't want to even be like my mom. It wasn't until after she died that I realized in many ways I was like her and that some of the best parts of me are like her. But it took a while to realize that. So after she died, I was going through her papers shortly after she died, and I found a little fragment of my grandmother's writing from her journal that she had written in 1931 about her, just about a day in their life of this family that was struggling through the Depression in Wisconsin. They lived on a farm. They had to stop farming for the years of the Depression and some afterward because they couldn't afford to pay the loan if they tried to, use farming to do it. So they rented it out. My grandfather worked in a tannery. So they had a really hard life. And I didn't really realize until I found this fragment of my grandmother's writing, first of all, what a good writer she was. And secondly, how really the fact that I've been lucky enough to live my life surrounded by words and making my living that way, reading and writing and travel, it was really because of them. And because I hadn't been this daughter who was always saying how wonderful they were and admiring them, I wanted to do two things. I wanted to really pay tribute to them for having really, in a way, inspired, filled me with the passion for reading and writing that then propelled my whole life's journey and allowed me to do things with my life that they were never able to do. And I know they would have loved to. So I wanted to pay tribute to them for that legacy. And I also wanted to tell part of their untold stories. So the first part, so that's why it's called A Long Way from Iowa, because my grandmother was born in this tiny little town in northeastern Iowa in 1892. And that's, in one way, that's where the, the story starts. And that's why I named the book what I did. In another way, the book started in 1992 in an unfinished attic in Brooklyn, where I was reading the journals after I found this little fragment, right, of my grandmother's writing, I started tearing the house apart, looking for more. And I think that there's a lot that either is still existing somewhere and hasn't been found, or was somehow lost along the way. So I didn't find that much of her writing, but I found what I could. And so then I'm sitting in this basically garret in Brooklyn in 1992, and I'm reading my grandmother's writing. And as I did that, I thought, that's when I thought, this is what I'm doing is what they wanted to do, and they didn't get to do it. So that's why I wrote the book. So what I did is I went to Iowa. I did a lot of research there, and I tried to fill out the story with those journals and letters I was able to find. I was able to find a certain number of letters and journals written by both my grandmother and my mother. And I went to the library in the town where my grandmother had lived and, um, did work in the archives, those small town newspapers would report everything, like so and so went to such and such a town on such and such a date and they went to visit this family. So I plowed through all this stuff and I put together as much of the story as I could. And so I wrote my grandmother as much of her story as I could. At one point, she took, they did both travel quite a bit for women of their social class and of that time. My grandmother, for example, took a train trip in 1916 from Iowa to Colorado, which is a long way, and was riding pack horses and all this crazy stuff. And my mother did a lot of bus travel before she got married. She when she was in nursing school and after she took several bus trips to the West Coast. There's a lot of material storytelling in here that's theirs. I put into the book as much of their stories as I could, and I tried to really link it also to mine and how they were connected. But for the purposes of this crowd, I think it makes sense. I mean, I think there's a lot of really interesting material. Actually, I was surprised when Adrian started to read. Adrian read part of the book while it was still in process, and she said, "I can't believe I'm so interested in these people from the early 1900s in some small town in Iowa."
It's true.
Yeah,
it's true. Because the writing is just silk. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
No, it is. Yeah.
So anyway, so I think there's a lot of good storytelling before we get to my adventure coming to France. But because what has drawn us all together here is France, I thought I would read you the chapter in which I talk about my first arrival in France. Everybody's had one, right?
A first arrival?
A first arrival in France. And so this is mine. It's called Into the Wider World. From the time I knew there was a place called France, I had wanted to go there. When I was a little girl, in my mind, France was a place where kings and queens lived in castles, situated in lovely, verdant valleys. As I became a little older, I became vaguely aware that it was a place where they spoke a language so beautiful that the words had a kind of sensuality about them. This was before I knew the word sensuality. I studied French in high school and college, and by the time I had dropped out of college and was, living temporarily back with my parents, the desire to go to France was beginning to become a quiet, desperate, and unhealthy obsession. I knew this one Sunday afternoon when, as I was walking along the road to visit a friend half a mile away, I found myself muttering to myself over and over the delicious words, Le Roi du Cœur, Le Roi du Cœur, Le Roi du Cœur, practically the whole way there. I had seen the film of the same name in Minneapolis the night before and could not let go of those lovely words, nor of the pleasure of speaking them aloud. Either I'm going to have to get over there, I announced to myself aloud in English, or I am going to become a lunatic. But it was a while before I was able to get there. Flying to Europe was very expensive in the late 1970s, and for someone who was earning her living as a typist, even while living at home with her parents, being able to save enough money to buy the plane ticket was going to take a while. That is why I was so excited when one day in 1977, Dan Rather announced on the CBS Evening News that a Sir Freddie Laker had just started a no-frills airline that was offering flights from New York to London for the unheard of price of $135. Okay, that's it, I said to myself as I listened to the rest of the story. Now I can do it. Getting over there was now feasible, but I knew that once I got there, I would want to be able to stay for a while. So I decided then and there that I would work and save as much money as I could for the next year and leave for Europe the following September. I began to plan with a girlfriend to leave 1 year later. To his credit, my boyfriend, who was about 15 years older than me and who had everything to lose, probably not much to gain in encouraging me in this venture, was very supportive of my plan. Not once did he use his considerable powers of persuasion to try to dissuade me from stepping out into the world on my own. On the contrary, when the time came to go a year later and the girlfriend was unable to join me, I hesitated. He urged me on and drove me to New York to catch the plane. You need to do this, he said. You can do this. And he was right on both counts. There was no channel then and no Eurostar train. In 1978, the choices of channel crossings were all by boat, either from Dover to Calais or from New Haven to Dieppe. The plan I came up with my London friend's help, was to make my assault on La Belle France gradually, warming up my untested French language skills in the friendlier territory of Normandy before attacking the capital. So it was that I took the longer channel crossing from New Haven to Dieppe, where there was a youth hostel I planned to stay at the first night. As the overnight boat drew near to the shore, people began to leave their benches and make for the exits. I saw one young man, an archaeologist fresh from a dig was my guess, judging from his deep and even tan, leave his seat, a seat which offered a prime view of the Dieppe harbor, and I slipped into it the moment he had vacated it. So it was with surprise that a few minutes later I saw that the same young man was back, wheeling a bicycle. Oh, did I steal your seat? I asked apologetically. Oh, it's okay, he said. He was nothing if not gallant. We struck up a short and unremarkable conversation, one young traveling American to another, and then we went on our separate ways. I didn't expect to ever see him again, nor did the thought occur to me that I wouldn't. That was our close encounter of the first kind, fleeting, on a boat. The second encounter came later that same day in the youth hostel. I had found my way there, using the public bus system in Dieppe, and was feeling quite pleased with myself, despite the gloomy weather. I arrived at the hostel before it was open for the day and was invited to wait in a kind of storage shed adjacent to the main hall where I could keep out of the rain. I was sitting there resting and absorbing the fact that I really was in France. The bus driver had taken my money and said, "Voila," as he gave me my ticket. When the door opened, and there was the same young American wheeling his bicycle. "Huh, you again," he said, in an unenthusiastic but not unfriendly tone, a comment that I echoed. He sat down on the uncovered mattress of the cot across from me, took a bar of chocolate out of his backpack. It was Milka chocolate with a lovely lavender wrapper. Still has the same wrapper. He cocked his head inquisitively at me, then asked, "Would you like a piece of chocolate?" "Oh, I'm afraid I would," I replied. There were very few guests in the hostel that night. Steve, for that was his name, asked me if I would like to go grocery shopping and then share a meal with him. I accepted his invitation and we went to the nearest supermarché. In the dairy aisle, he picked up a quart of milk. "Les fraises," he read. Wow, strawberry milk. Being of a generation where most women still felt that the polite thing to do was to pretend that men were smarter than they were, I felt caught in a bind. I said diplomatically, "I think that means fresh." "Oh, no," he replied with complete confidence. "I know very few words in French, but I do know that fraise means strawberry." There were no fireworks during this close encounter of the second kind. The vegetarian spaghetti we prepared in the kitchen of the hostel made for a pleasant and friendly but unremarkable meal. I remember only that Steve told me that he thought Marcel Duchamp's portrait should be on the 100-franc note. It turned out he was not an archaeologist, but an artist, and the deep and even tan came not from a dig, but from the extensive bicycle touring he had done around Europe that summer. He gave me the phone number of the friends he would be staying with outside Paris, in case you should happen to pass through Paris, he said. I took the number and put it in my pocket, saying I probably would pass through Paris, but not right away. I had other things to do first. The next morning, I left the hostel early. It was raining again, and as I headed down the street toward the train station, the cheap plastic poncho I was wearing became the prop for a Don Quixote-like episode in which I, burdened with my backpack and hampered by my flimsy poncho, clumsily navigated the narrow streets through a fairly heavy rain, during which gusts of wind brought the poncho with regular and maddening frequency over my face, blinding me and causing me to stumble. It was irritating, but the train station wasn't far away, and it was hard to dampen my spirits for very long. I found my way onto the train for Rouen, initiating the use of my 30-day Europass and feeling extremely adventurous. The very first new word I learned in France was appropriately the word for strike. The train pulled out of the station, moved a short distance, and then stopped and didn't move for a very long time. Pourquoi? I finally dared to ask, and the handsome young Frenchman who was sharing a pole with me responded with a rueful grin. Grève. That was how I learned that French strikes tend to favor slowing down and annoying passengers rather than totally interrupting service. Accordingly, we did reach our destination that day with no problem, just a bit late. For me, Rouen, the town where Joan of Arc had met her final fate, with its 15th century buildings, was a fitting introduction to the continent. I had always been taken with the story of the simple country girl who had followed her vision and led the rightful king of France to his coronation. I stayed there a day, and then in fulfillment of the plan my American friend in London had helped me devise, went to Bayeux to see the famous tapestry and spend a wonderful day biking to Arromanches, where I visited the Musée du Débarquement and devoured the details of recent history that I later learned had involved some of my own relatives. Back in Bayeux that night, a Saturday night, I found that Dr. Zhivago was playing, dubbed in French, of course, and decided that watching one of my favorite films and hearing it spoken in French was a great opportunity, far more important than taking the time and having the courage to eat another meal in a restaurant by myself. The night before in Rouen, I had eaten alone, ordering with a spirit of adventure, and had regretted my choice. I could eat a big meal tomorrow, I told myself, and get by with popcorn and a chocolate bar for tonight. So it was that in the following days, I nearly suffered the embarrassment of starving to death in France, a country known throughout the world for its fine cuisine, and in the process learned about Sunday nights and Mondays in France, when most, if not all, of the businesses are closed, and the merchants who have provided for all those leisurely Sunday feasts for their neighbors take a day of rest for themselves.
Thank you, Janet. Okay, we have a surprise guest. Where is she? Back there. I see you, Lisa Anselmo. Lisa Anselmo, author of My Part-Time Paris Life, was a speaker here at Après-Midi last week, and we encouraged her to come say a few words here and to actually kind of bring it all together and wrap up the event. She is, well, the author of this book. She is also, you know what? Can I let you talk about you?
Sure,
Or,
talk about me.
you want to, yeah?
Give me a extra few minutes.
Okay, I'm gonna let Lisa's much better at this than I am. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Adrian and Ella, for inviting me to take part in this amazing authors we have. Novelists, we have memoirists. What a great group of writers today. And I'm honored to be a part of that. Thank you so much. So who am I? I'm Lisa Anselmo, and I'm an author and a marketing creative director. I am a writing coach. And I live in Paris mostly, but New York too. And I have a book called My Part-Time Paris Life, a blog of the same name, and a series on YouTube where I showcase, this season I showcase reasons who have taken the risk to change their lives for the better. And that's pretty much the premise of this book. So before I talk, I want to take a poll of the room to see what I should focus on. So how many people were at Adrian's Après-Midi last week? So we'll talk about any of that. And how many people know of my book or have read the book? Okay, so I'll tell a little bit about that. So the book is the story of really about the relationship I had with my mother. She was a huge part of my life. She was a very strong personality, as most Italian mothers are. And when she passed away from breast cancer, I didn't know who I was on my own without a strong will to guide me. So I go to Paris, where I've been going for many years, and I buy an apartment because in my mind I thought I'm going to literally put a pied a terre on my happy place. And that really set about a positive event that really changed my life. And I talk a lot about that. It's a story of finding self-worth. It's really a journey of finding purpose after loss. But in order to find a purpose, I have to discover my self-worth and my way to be happy.
I'm terribly sorry to interrupt, but
That's okay.
this did not happen.
Way to find unconditional happiness, and that was something I hadn't done.
We have now found unconditional happiness.
We have unconditional happiness. So the journey is, it takes you through really a bit about the story of my mom, and then really what happens when I come to Paris to try to live the dream. In fact, one of the sections is called Living the Dream, ? And the strokes and slaps of expat life really taught me what I needed to learn to find my true self, my authentic self. Paris is a huge character in the story. It's the scene where everything takes place. It's my foil. It's the villain. It's my best friend. It's my lover, and that's sort of how that all works. And it's a story of me and Paris and my mother, and how it all shaped me into who I am today. So we thought that because many of you know the book, and I already did a big talk, Ella and I thought we could talk a bit about, and you tell me if this interests you, a bit about the craft of writing a memoir. How many people, I know I'm incessant poll taking today, how many people are thinking of writing a book but maybe don't know where to start? Anybody? There's one. Anybody? Okay. How many people are interested in the craft behind a memoir? What makes a good story? This one there? Great, there's a bunch. So I thought I'd talk a bit about my process, and you can ask questions, and maybe the other authors could chime in at some point about, how do we get the story on paper? So I'm very lucky in that the St. Martin's Press reached out to me to write this, and I didn't even have an agent at the time, and I didn't know what my story was. I couldn't even begin to pull it together. They said, we want you to talk about what your life became like when you bought the apartment in Paris. I said, I go every 8 weeks and I drink and eat cheese with my friends. There's not a story here. So, but the truth is, there is a story, and your story, everyone's story, is very unique. A memoir isn't about, I was born and then this happened, and then you write a memoir like you write any work of fiction. You need the goal. What is your goal? What is the main character's goal? What motivates them? And then, of course, you need conflicts along the way, which Paris served up so many conflicts that got me in the way of my goal. My goal was to find happiness. And so when you write a memoir, the truth is you really have to think about all the things that you would enjoy in a good work of fiction. So it's not so much about what you put in, but it's often what you leave out. We don't need all the gory details. We don't need to know about when you were born, unless something about how you were born is about, affects your journey. If you think about your central character being you, pick one thing one thing you wanted to achieve, and it's often best if you do it in a small period of time. So for me, it was really the main story took place over 3 months, but of course, plenty of flashbacks about my relationship with my mother to flesh the story along. So when I'd have a challenge, I'd reflect, and then I'd tell you a bit about my relationship with my mother. So that is really one of the main things I can tell. One of the biggest mistakes that first-time memoirists do is they say, I was born, and then, but it's really finding a story, one thing. If you could pick one thing in your life, one moment that really shaped you, write about that. And often you don't start at the beginning. So I'm just going to read a little about, just to give you a sense. So this is chapter 1, and my book, I decided to write my book into 5 sections. And each section is sort of a chunk of time where something happens that moves it to the next section. And it just opens very simply. My mother was the most beautiful woman in the world. She was Audrey Hepburn, thin, chic, and classy, always put together with her ever-present red lipstick. I pitied all the other kids because their mothers were not my mother. Ma was perfect in every way. At least I thought so until I was 4.
And that's the classic open strong, and make people go, whoa, boom. Okay, I'm ready to keep going. And that was a pivotal moment. And why I chose that moment was because it is a book about finding self-worth. I mean, at the end of the day, there's a lot of themes in this book, but the biggest one was learning that I deserved to be happy. And when I thought about my life and I thought about the one most pivotal moment in my childhood, it was this one. So when I was 4, I was watching her put on her makeup one morning, something I loved doing, especially when she brushed on her liquid eyeliner with one sweeping motion, a delicate swoop at the outer corner of each eye. She was glorious. She was a princess. Ugly, she said to her reflection in the mirror. That word flipped my entire world on its edge, sending everything I believed flying. My mind scrambled to gather it up again, to make sense of it. If Ma was ugly, then what was I? If Ma wasn't perfect and beautiful, then what was? That was the day I learned about worthlessness. And through the rest of the book, you'll see that theme come up again and again. Each time I learn a little more and a little more and a little more about what I deserved and how I deserved a generous life, a full life, a happy life, and how stingy I was with myself. And of course, plenty of flashbacks about where that comes from. Depression era parents, poor grandparents, save everything for good, don't use those towels, those are for good. All of those things really added up into my psyche. And so I talk about every little thing. I mean, you will learn more about me than probably I should have shared. But and so it opens strong, and it does open sad. The next scene is in the hospital when she passes, and I talk about that. I won't get into that here. And then I jump to Paris. So I start with the pivotal moment in my life. I move to really where the beginning of my hardship starts, the death of my mother, and then I jump to Paris. So now we got Paris, right? Problem, right? Problem, childhood problem, current problem, setting. And so that's a great way to kind of go through it. And I don't really hold back. Chapter 2 is called Paris Was an Accident. And the first sentence is, I hated Paris. I was 16 and my French class took a trip over Easter break. That was the last stop on a multi-city tour of Switzerland and France. 13 high school kids from northern New Jersey transported to Europe where we'd practice our French and soak up some culture. And then I tell you all about what that was like for a 16-year-old, did not like it, had no idea how horrible, Paris could be, but it did leave its mark. Because I was a country kid. I was from Buffalo, but I grew up in the country, and it was dirty. This was like the early 80s, and it did not leave a good impression. But then I go back 20 years later, and everything changed. So, and then I talk about the apartment that I ended up buying as a way to save my life, and then how that changed me. So I just wanted to walk you through a little bit of the process and my creative flow, in case that might inspire you if you want to write even your own little memoir for yourself. Think about the moments that shaped you, and don't worry about all the little details. Give the reader credit. They'll fill in the gaps. And think about what parts of my story are relevant. Not what I want to talk about for my own self. It's not my diary for me. What are the things that I think other people can relate to? Now, believe me, when I was writing this, all I kept saying was, who is going to care? Who is going to care about this? I was in agony writing about myself all day long. But when you really are vulnerable and when you really divulge the truth and you dig deep, people do relate. They do care. And I have had someone say to me, thank you for understanding me, she said. And it was a memoir. So you never know, even if you're creative in other ways, you never know how your work will touch other people. If you are true to yourself and you don't worry about, is it sellable? Is it, is anyone going to care? If it comes from you and it's honest and authentic, you will find your audience, or you will find your buyer if you're an artist, or whatever it is you do, to do it authentically and to have the courage to be vulnerable. And that's how I managed to get this out. I also had an editor who really helped yank the story out of me. So if you do something creative, having a creative partner, they don't have to be a professional editor or a coach, but just to have a critique partner or someone you trust who can really tell you, bounce it off of you and help you to really get to your truth. That's a little that helped me a great deal. So I don't know if Ella, if you had some questions or anything that you wanted me to touch on. I mean, do you want me to talk about publishing or?
Yeah. Well, Lisa, I think this is a good. It's 5 o'clock now, but is everyone okay to go over a little bit since we started late? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to bring all the authors up and open up a Q&A. Is
Yeah,
that
a little
possible?
Q&A.
Can we do that?
So yeah, so
Thank
anyway,
you.
so that's writing, and let's meet the rest of the authors again.
Okay, let's everybody up. Well, we're gonna all talk into somebody's mic. Okay, so you want to come on up? Can everybody get up here?
Oh,
Can
I
you
did
get up
want to
here?
say, do I want to say I want to have books for sale so that but they can reach me another way? Like, are you going to talk about that?
Yeah, we did.
Okay,
right?
I don't have any books
I'm
to
going to
sell.
stand over here so you can talk into my mic.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Talking to her mic, talking to my mic.
Okay.
Oh, well, just like bombard us.
Someone
with
did have a question
questions.
there. So you had a question. I saw you raise your hand. Okay, so let's talk about that. So there are obviously three ways to publish, right? There's traditional, where you have an agent, ideally, who pitches your book around, and you go to a publisher and they publish your book. There's indie publishing, which is what they call self-publishing indie publishing now, and there are a lot of platforms that do that, some very good ones. And there are some really great hybrid publishers who are kind of a combination. You pay to play, meaning you pay to publish, but they also offer PR and marketing and distribution. So that's the tricky part. You can write the book and you can get it published, but how do you get it into the hands of the readers? And those are the decisions that we have to make when we choose which way to publish.
What do the rest of you think of that?
I'd like to say that that I consulted an old friend from college who was a senior editor at Random House for 30 years. And because I was approached by St. Martin's, and I love that press.
Me too.
But they saw the character of Bree and they said, we're very interested in the book, but we want you to make Bree a man. And I just thought,
what do you know about that?
How, it was unthinkable. So my friend Olga said to me, I've been doing this a long time. 50% of the books are now published, self-published. She said, I highly recommend Book Baby. They're fabulous.
That's what I use.
Mm-hmm.
And did you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're fabulous. And one of my editors was my sister, who was a writer, and another one was another friend who was a writer and a screenwriter. And so I went that route because I didn't really like the editors presented to me at Book Baby, and I wouldn't go the route with them. But every other thing, every other step of the way, they were fabulous. From the font, all these things you don't even think about, that they worked with me step by step. And it was fabulous. And I could tell my own story, and I didn't have somebody telling me to change it, change Bree into a man, and all this stuff. And I thought that's not my book. My book is about a woman.
Right. And how can you write about a man? I mean, you got to write what you know, they say.
Yeah, write what you know. I'm a girl, So, and it wasn't like with Flaubert, Madame Bovary, c'est moi. There's no way. So they were fabulous, and I had complete creative control and guidance at the same time. So
it's also easier to keep your book in print if you go that route.
Yeah.
Right. It's easier to keep your book in print when you print it indie style. Yeah, because the publisher can pull your book out of print. St. Martin's pulled a whole bunch of books out of print. They kept them digital only, which is great so that they still exist. But what do you bring with you when you do book talks? So you're at the mercy of their decisions. That's the downside as a conventional publisher.
I did the self-publishing. I took the self-publishing route, and 10 years ago there were even fewer options. So I'm interested in knowing about these hybrids. Caroline?
Me too, actually. I started writing not knowing if I would let anyone read it. So I started with self-editing, and this is just the beginning of this process for me. So, yeah,
I just want say one final thing about hybrid publishing. People in the know in the publishing industry said, whatever you do, don't go with a hybrid publisher. So
Why? I have friends that have had a lot of luck with that.
there have been, but I have friends who've had really bad luck.
Yeah, but I mean, in what way? Do you have any specifics? I'm not
yeah,
challenging you. I'm
No,
curious.
Challenge me all you want. I'm on the verge of falling asleep, but I've heard that people have had bad experiences, and the cost of it is astronomical. It's about double of what Book Baby.
Oh
would
yeah.
charge.
Oh, it is. It is.
And
yeah.
as far as Book Baby is concerned, I don't know how, but I've made a lot more sales not going through the hybrid.
That's
and my
great.
friends who went through the hybrid are having trouble selling their book.
And that's what hybrid sells. They sell. We give you distribution. We give you because they give you the things a traditional publisher does. See, good advice. Thank you.
I don't know. There's pros and cons.
No,
I mean, Book Baby also does the distribution, and that's really important. Yeah. And they distribute through Ingram, which is
which is great.
And that is the one factor that a lot of indie bookstores, or probably all bookstores, don't want to buy books that are not distributed through Ingram. And so Book Baby does that, and they also have, you can add on certain things having to do with the marketing and editing and all that kind of thing. But yeah, their customer service is great. Also, they're really approachable.
We don't work for Book Baby either, but this is like two people.
No, it's true.
Amazing experience.
Yeah, I've all three of my books were with Book Baby. I mean, actually, the first one was published by a publisher, and it was not a good experience. They put the book out of print. There's all kinds of details about how and why they did that, which was part of the bad story. And so eventually my co-author and I just said, forget it, we got our rights back. And then we published the ebook through Book Baby.
And you like the cover design that they do?
I like the two that they've done for me.
Yeah,
I didn't like the one for the first book.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like when you self-publish, just make sure that you're going to spend any money, spend it on a good cover design, because it makes all the difference, I will say.
My daughter actually was part of the design of my book cover. Yeah, this Book Baby did a couple of things, and we didn't like the image, and my daughter, who's an artist, said, I can do better than that, Mom. And let me pick the images. And she did the coloration and everything, and then suggested it to the guy at Book Baby, because they assigned a man to do a woman's romance cover. And I don't know. But
what's with the men thing?
I don't know. I love men. Listen, I love men. I really do. But this is.
But they would not.
But guys like my book too. You
had a question, someone here?
Yeah. What's your publish? Self-publish. How do you
You, you start meet the authors. Yeah, that's basically all that I've done. And
you make more money with self-publishing because if a publisher takes your book, you make pennies. But with Amazon, you get 50% of any, audio book, whatever, and you get quite a large percentage, from the print book. Yeah, whereas with St. Martin's, the deal I had with the contract and everything was that I would make a lot less. But that wasn't my motivation, because St. Martin's, I think, is great.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot that an author has to do, and that's the thing that's hard, because a lot of us are, no pun intended, bookish, and you really have to know how to market yourself. Yes, social media. There are a lot of platforms for authors to promote their books. There's joint promotions you can do with other authors. Newsletters help. You can do paid ads. There's a whole system to do paid ads for authors through Facebook. It's a lot of work. Um, and Amazon has promotions that you can chime in on as well. It's just but through this, I had a regular publisher.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I had a regular a conventional publisher, and they were great for 3 months, and then I was on my own. So no matter what, you still have to do the lion's share of promotion and get your face out there and do what you need to do to get the book out. Some people are really good at it, some people are not, and sometimes it's worth hiring somebody to help at least initially to give you a plan.
Adrian is incredible at promotion. Really, you are.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to say that actually it is a lot of work. There's no doubt about it, and you have to be kind of dogged about it and persistent and keep it going. But it can also be fun. It can also be lots of fun. Twitter is still good for promoting books, very good. Facebook, you can have, like I have a writer page. I have a Demystifying the French page. So why it's fun is that you put yourself out there in this kind of platform, and then you find people who are interested in what you have to say. You make new friends that way. It really can be fun.
That's a great way of wonderful.
And it really depends on what the goal of your publishing your book is. Mine, as I said, is a vapid little beach read. It's not going to be on the New York Times bestsellers, but guess what? Because I wrote it, I get to be with some New York Times bestsellers every year. So yay me. But it just depends. I wanted to capture this moment in time, and I wanted something to live on from this particular moment in time. Proceeds, I couldn't get the okay from everybody. Over 200 people appeared in my book. I mean, we were busy socializing in my book, and I couldn't go back and get everybody's okay to publish, use their likeness, and so on and so forth. So I just did the smart thing, and proceeds go to the retirement home, Le Petit Sœur de Pauvre, here in Nice. And no, if somebody wants to take me to court because their photos in my book, I'm not making money off of it. It's going to the retirement home. So it depends on what your objective is. Yes, Caroline's in my book. We go way back.
Yeah, I guess Ella is right, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here today, by the way. So,
Thank you for joining us.
yeah, it all depends with what's your intent from the beginning, and for me, it's more part of a therapy, so it really doesn't matter too much. I said I would be glad if one person gets impacted by my book, so that's already a win for me, and everything that comes on top of that is extra. So, sure.
The shape of it.
I'm sure it was over a cocktail. I was like, hey, this will work. I mean, I really didn't. I mean, what I did do was I was fortunate enough to many years ago have a dear friend that worked for Disney, and he did the design. So I really lucked out, and it has been that's helped a lot. But I don't. That's a great question that I don't even. It's been 10 years. I don't remember. It's more like a coffee table. What I was trying to do was keep it at a price point, and so that's why the pictures are in black and white. Last year we had Craig Carlson speak, who is a New York Times bestseller author like Lisa,
And he'll be here for après-midi.
and he'll be here in July for après-midi.
Right.
But I was happy when I was reading his second book to go, "Phew, he too has black and white photos in there." But the ebook, which is available, has the photos are in color. So I was just trying to keep the price point down.
One more. Go for it, Pam.
Do you also find that you need to have a landing page as an author page, or do you use other
The question was, I didn't really hear
So
it.
the question was, do we need some kind of a web page or do we just do social media? And yeah,
No.
I mean, I think an author website it's a must. You have to have a universe that you're building where people can go, and that's to me. You start with the author website, and this is what I do for when I coach with clients. Like you start with the website. Who are you? What is your author brand? What is your universe? And then obviously you can post all your books there, and you can drive people there. That's where your newsletter goes to. So that's you need to create the little world where you live, and then everything else spins off of that.
Start with a blog. Start with a blog.
I can attest to that. So
I started with a blog too, but I'm shaking my head now.
well, just right. Just
That's
right.
right.
That's it. And I think we're about to wrap up. And
think
so mark your calendars. Next year will be the 10th anniversary of Meet the Authors. It will be the first Saturday of June. That corresponds with the festival, the book festival hosted here in Nice, which goes on through tomorrow. And so we will have
that's being taken place at
the Jardin Albert.
Okay, that's Albert Premier.
Yes.
Okay.
And so we encourage you. The authors are going to stick around. Come meet us. If you have a book, we can sign it for you. If not, you can order it and
order it online.
Yes.
Buy their books. Please support the authors by buying their books.
Yes. And mark your calendars for next year. Details to follow.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you, authors. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, La Havane.
Yes.